Hello, and welcome to another episode of the AgNext Podcast. We're always excited to tell you about what's next from AgNext. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about AgNext's Climate Smart Research Facility with Dr. Sara and Leo Sitorski. I'm one of your hosts, Jen Reeskamp. Most folks call me JR, and I'm here with
Pedro Carvalho.
Awesome, and we're excited to jump in today. Let's get into it.
Welcome back. Welcome back, Dr. Place. It's a pleasure to have you here again.
Absolutely.
And today we have a new guest.
Brand new guest.
Thank you.
So, Leo, can you take a time to introduce yourself for people who are listening and watching us?
Absolutely. So I'm Leo Sitorski, originally from Brazil. I've got a master's degree in ruminant nutrition. I've been with AgNext now as a research associate for the last 6 months. Prior to it, I've worked in the feedlot industry for between 6 to 7 years as a research manager. I worked for a large feedlot operation down in Nebraska, as well as a seed stock operation here in Colorado. Both roles, I was always involved with feed conversion animals and basically everything that involves a research manager.
Yeah.
So bringing lots of experience to the AgNext team.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's awesome.
I think there's a lot to it, and all my practical experience adds, and it's going to be good. I've been very thankful and grateful to be with AgNext today and able to put in practice everything that I have as experience.
That's awesome. Well, welcome to the podcast. We're glad you're on.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, for first question goes to you.
Okay.
We're going to give Leo a break.
Okay.
So Leo mentioned that he's working on the Climate Smart Research Facility. Can you give our listener and people who are watching us a big overview? What is the Climate Smart Research Facility and what makes such a unique facility to do such cool research?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Climate Smart Research Facility has been in its current form since around November of 2022. Mm-hmm. And basically what this facility entails is mostly in the confinement feeding phase of things, so where we can feed animals higher forage, backgrounding diets, or finishing diets. And it encompasses a few different things. It encompasses smart feed units. So these are things that can measure individual feed intake from individual animals. Green feed units, which can measure individual methane and carbon dioxide and oxygen and hydrogen emissions from animals. So altogether out at the RDEC facility, where this Climate Smart Research Facility is approximately 6 pens, not approximately, specifically 6 pens. And we can house up to 300 animals at once. So that gives us an opportunity to look at different dietary interventions, different genetic influences that impact enteric methane emissions, but also animal performance. And that same facility as a part of that facility, we have a couple of those green feed machines that we can measure emissions from grazing animals as well. So it's both extensive beef cattle systems and intensive beef cattle systems.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the stationary green feeds and then the ones used for grazing, just so the listeners have an idea of what that means when you say that?
Yeah. So in the Climate Smart Research Facility, in the pens themselves, we have green feed units that are basically all in line with the feed alley. So the animals can come up to the green feed machine and visit right alongside bunks. And so we can kind of get into what these green feeds are and everything else. But ultimately, these are basically like voluntary self-feeders where the animal comes up and gets a bit of a bait feed and stays there. The pasture units are very similar, but they're actually on a trailer, and they have solar panels on them to allow them to be used in more remote places where we don't actually have electricity available readily. So same concept. The animals come up to the feeder, and they actually consume feed, and then while they're there, they don't realize it, but they're participating in research, and we sample their emissions while they're there.
And the cool thing that you can measure up to, let's say, 300 animals individually, right? So that's a unique thing about putting all of these smart feed and the green feed, which we always get the confusion when you're out there, because the green feed is silver and the smart feed is green.
That's right.
Yes.
But it also gives the ability to measure individual animals, right?
Yes.
That's one of the unique things about this facility.
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, at least for that kind of feedlot facility, right, it's the largest of its kind for a land-grant university to actually have that many in a confinement situation. So we're very fortunate, and that's really come from industry partnerships, the ability to have that type of facility, and it's allowed us to do a lot of cool work in the last closing in on 2 years.
That's a great lead in to our next question is who are those industry partners that have made the Climate Smart Research Facility possible, make the research that you do possible? If you just wanted to talk on that a little bit.
Yeah. So those industry partners, I mean, some of those folks that are really important is Five Rivers Cattle Feeding. So they're important in terms of a continuous partner for us for doing research and donating cattle, basically, and paying for feed, but also very generously purchase the green feed units that we use out there. And so that has made all of our research possible. Other partners that are really important for that facility are Midwest PMS, so a liquid feed supplement company that's local here to Colorado, Farm Credit Services, and actually CLOC itself, which is the company that manufactures those pieces of equipment that we've been talking about, the green feed and the smart feed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's important to just recognize those folks for making the work that we get to do possible.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Yep. So now we're switching gears, putting Leo on spot.
Leo's back in the hot seat.
Yeah. So you mentioned you joined AgNext almost 6 months ago, right?
That's right. Yep.
Time flies.
It's going by.
Yes. Can you just tell a little bit more about your role as a research associate and how you've been working this facility?
Absolutely. So basically, as a research associate for AgNext in feedlot systems, I would say, my position basically it's composed of two different roles. Would be the outreach, where I'm kind of hosting all majority of the tours and groups that we get, all the visitors we get at RDAC to visit our Climate Smart Research Facility over there. So we get several different groups from young teenagers to scientists, people from abroad. It's always a pleasure having them there. And as well as the research associate, I would say, position itself, which would be more ensuring that data collection, that accuracy, as well as developing a consistent protocol throughout the trials. So we try to basically do the best we can to validate that project and make sure we follow all the guidelines and standard protocols, basically, from each specific trial.
Yeah, that's a pretty important thing, right, Sarah? Like making sure
Absolutely.
that what we plan to do is actually what we are.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And again, just like we talked before, I think it comes along very good considering this background that I have from a practical world, basically, and bringing that to academia and combining both. I think it's a valuable spot to be, and I think there's great teamwork here. So we've been doing some good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I know we talked a little bit about the different kind of equipment that was in there, but then I'm going to ask Leo another question.
Sure.
I think if you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of a detailed breakdown of the types of technologies, and the reason I know you already talked a little bit about them, but you actually did a training. You did like a certification on the equipment that we have. So if you want to talk a little bit about maybe what that certification program was like and what you learned, and then anything maybe that Sarah didn't talk about the equipment, if you just wanted to kind of button that stuff together.
Sure. So, basically, just like Dr. Place mentioned here, we have the smart feeds and the green feeds over there. So thinking about the smart feeds itself, which would be the bins, right, where that animal eats out of it. It's basically a bin which has load cells to it, so it scales. And then, so that feed that's in the bin, by feed disappearance, I'm able to track individual intake of every single animal. So that animal voluntarily is going to stick his head in there. And by feed disappearance from the bunk, I can understand how much he's eating. And then following that up with a total body weight collection, we can look for or test that animal as of feed conversion, basically looking for the most efficient animal in a feedlot setup. And just like mentioned before, we have 6 pens over there. We can house about 300 head, and every single pen has a green feed. That device, just like JR mentioned, I went through a course with CLOC in Rapid City, and that was quite unique. They they showed us and taught us from basically top bottom exactly how does the equipment work, how we do the protocol, the maintenance, which is very important, calibrations and everything. So basically, voluntarily, if you think about the green feed more like a snack machine for humans, it's that's kind of the
yeah, we always like to call them snack machines.
I think that's a good way of putting that. So that animal is going to voluntarily come to and grab a bait.
What do you use for bait?
Right now, that's a good question. Right now, we have alfalfa pellets over there. So for instance, that's what we have. You could certainly use different pellets. They seem to be very...
they like those ones,
they
okay,
like those
seems
ones.
like.
Yeah. So we get a lot of visitors, daily visitors, of course. And as that animal sticks his head in the manifold, which is the device itself, he's going to stick the head in there and be snacking, right? So we sampling that breath, basically, or the burp of the animal, if that makes sense. There is an air pump kicking in, and then that gas flux is going to go through the system. So the system, it's smart. It's going to sample that gas flux and then runs through all the electronics at the bottom of it, where we can assess exactly which gases or greenhouse gas emission gases are on that specific sample.
From that individual animal.
From that specific animal, yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It is.
Be able to dial it down that specifically.
I agree completely. And considering it is a voluntarily assessment, makes quite unique. Just like Dr. Place mentioned, it's definitely one of its kinds facilities in a research university, I would say.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So basically, both of you have mentioned like we are measuring feed efficiency, let's say feed intake and body weight gain and gas production, right, sir? So there is a big need in the industry to collect that data, right? That is why we have the partners that you mentioned. We're very thankful to have them. We were able to bring Leo from the industry to work and help us here. Can you just and you mentioned we're getting close to 2 years. How important and what type of data have we collected in this almost 2 years that we're running the facility? And just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah. So it's really important just to step back and say, well, why would we even measure this, right? Well, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? That classic adage.
Yep.
And in this space...
Always reminds me of Greg Toma when I hear that. I always think of Greg Toma.
Yes. He likes to measure everything. It's important. And yeah, so anyways, in that space, right, it's important for us to measure what we're actually assuming animals' emissions are. And so that's important for several different reasons, right? It's important for refining emission inventories, whether it's like the national inventory or emission inventories in supply chains for companies. It's also important for us to have that type of facility to actually test mitigation solutions at a scale that's more applicable to an actual commercial feedlot, right? Rather than just a handful of animals, but looking at what if animals are in group house situations where they're on full feed that we would expect in a feedlot? What is the implication? And even just identifying animals that are high or low emitters naturally, right? And thinking about the genetics and different microbial influences on it. So with that facility, we're able to tackle all those types of questions and hopefully make our baselines better in terms of where our emissions really are today. But then also say, well, what can we actually do practically to lower these emissions while paying attention to, most importantly, the animal performance, right, in terms of feed efficiency and the other economically relevant components of cattle feeding.
So far, JR brought Greg here, and Greg always talk with us, say, hey, what are you measuring? It's
manage what you measure.
Manage what you measure. That's right.
And he gives us a hard time based on the data that we are collecting. Not, I'm saying give us a hard time because sometimes what we are measuring is not
what we assume.
What we assume.
Yeah.
How many animals have we collected there? And I don't want to put it in the spot.
I looked this
Did
up
you look it up before?
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't remember.
Ask.
Yes.
That's great.
And how are the measurements that we are collecting compared to some of the equations? That's something that you have a postdoc work on that right now, right?
Yes. So total, I would say across everything since fall of 2022, we've done 11 experiments.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Wow.
Yeah,
It
that's
is.
why we're
It
tired.
is, yeah.
That's why we're tired.
My gray hair is coming.
That's age, buddy.
Yeah.
That's
So-
age. Just cute.
9 of those have been in this facility that we're talking about with the 6
Okay.
pens. 2 have been kind of specifically grazing experiments that we've been doing. And yeah, we have like 170 records from animals from grazing, 460 from backgrounding or higher forage diets, and
Okay.
then 815 animals that have been exposed when they've been eating a high grain finishing diet. So that's a very large,
Almost 1,500.
yes.
And by exposed, you mean exposed to the green feed machine?
Exposed to the green
Okay.
feed.
Okay,
Because
just
it
wanted
is
to clarify.
voluntary research, and sometimes they decide to not participate, but they still get to eat. So they're just like hanging out there. So most of those animals we have quality records from, and so that's kind of that question of how well does the EPA emission inventory say line up? I mean, we haven't published it yet, so I would just say preliminarily there's been a few cases where what we measure from animals fed a high grain finishing diet tends to be a bit higher than we would expect in the emission inventory. And so, as you alluded to right now, Dr. Vargas is working on evaluating basically the finishing data that we have, where we figure we have pretty high quality data, and we can talk about that, where we have at least 55 spot samples from these animals, and we say, okay, we're going to look at those animals and see how well it compares. And at least thus far, again, preliminarily, we'll get this research published hopefully soon. A lot of the prediction equations are not very good. So,
So
at least
opportunity there for some improvement.
there's opportunity for improvement. And so that's what we hope to keep building towards in the next couple of years as we feed a wide array of diets in the facility, which will be actually really helpful to that cause of getting a broader cross-section of diets, more representative of all the different diets we might feed across the country to cattle.
Interesting. And you mentioned the grazing, right? It's not the easiest thing to collect.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really important as well, right?
Very important, right? So yeah, and I think we've mentioned this on prior podcasts, right? But most of the emissions, the methane emissions, are coming from grazing animals, both because there's just more grazing animals in the U.S. cattle system, and because they make more methane when they're grazing. Yeah. And so, and you did some great research of that, right? Where we took that one group of animals from grazing to a high forage diet and then high grain diet, and it's quite dramatic, right? When you look at the emissions, as soon as you switched to the higher grain diet, the emissions dropped pretty substantially. So, which is always good when we reaffirm what we've known for 100 years, right? Yes. That's always a good thing.
There are only a few things that we can, this actually.
Yeah, so that's what exactly. So we already are doing a key thing in the U.S. cattle industry, right? We're feeding grain to animals, grain-based diets, and that lowers methane emissions. So we are mitigating methane that way.
Cool.
That's awesome. Leo, you had talked about this just a little bit ago, that we have several visitors that come out to see us and visit our facility. And I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been like giving those tours? What are people's responses, and what are some of their takeaways?
Absolutely. So, it's been great experience over there. I've been networking a lot. Usually we get very interested groups with smart questions, and I think it's important, this outreach position, that we allow them actually to be exposed to what we do out there, and also plant the little seed in their brain of thinking about livestock production in a sustainable way, right? Thinking and basically seeing that we are assessing greenhouse gas emissions, that we are thinking about the world itself, but at the same time being able to feed the world, right? And not affect our production system. So I think it's been great, from 4-H groups to researchers and veterinaries from abroad. It's been a pleasure, and I think we conquering a lot of ground over there. That's great.
That's great. Awesome.
And great work that the communication teams does as well. We've had even TV coming out, and
absolutely, you guys are big players on that. Yeah, thank you.
Well, and if anybody listening is interested to see our facility, we have some. I think we have a blog post on it, and there's lots of pictures on our social media. Folks would want to kind of check that out too. But
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, Sarah, in addition to Leo work out there pretty much every day, we have other folks that are regularly working there, interns, grad students. How important is to have those future professionals, I would say, working out there and learning this process?
Yeah, I mean, without them, none of it gets done, right? Basically.
Absolutely.
So just from a practical standpoint of actually getting all the tasks done every single day, they're absolutely essential to the team. But it is an incredible learning opportunity for both the undergraduates and graduate students. And we've seen a lot of our students, right, a lot of growth in terms of their ability to manage projects and manage complexity and also participate in some of the outreach components. So it's just a great training ground for young people in addition to collecting all this cool information.
Absolutely.
I would agree completely. Let me just add a little bit to it. I think what Sara brought up now, it's very important having these interns over there, the grad students or even CSU staff helping us. It's tremendous, and I think none of that would be accomplished if not by them, right? So, yeah, I'm glad to be out there also to assist them and help troubleshoot whenever needed.
Yes.
Perfect. I know that we have been doing a lot of work to stand up the research facility. We've partnered with industry, and Dr. Place went through kind of the list of partners, and I know that we're still working on it. We're still building, and I think the next phase of it is we're looking to build a feed center to be able to dial into very specific ration mixes. And so I'm curious, can you talk to us about what you're working on there, and what are your largest challenges with that and working on that, and how are you trying to work to overcome that as you build this awesome feed center and make an addition to this really great facility?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, JR, it's a process it's a project that's coming along, and we've been very grateful. We designed a project which we've been calling a batch station. Will allow us to batch smaller diets in a very precise way. I think that's our major goal over there. Still being able to feed cattle in a precise way, different diets, for different trials, and trying to have more automated system through it. So giving less chance to errors, basically, or human errors, but also with technology, basically with high technology, as well as with all the intake from the faculty and students, I would say so. So basically, the way we have right now, we're designing, it's a stationary mixer. We're going to have as well as bins outside of the barn. So all of that's going to be fed through conveyor belts to the stationary mixer.
Cool.
And then having the stationary mixing jumping into another conveyor belt. And then that's going to jump into our device for feeding. And again, that would allow students and grad students to be extremely involved with the daily process of the project, as well as assessing and learning about bunk calls and feed delivery, assessing animal health. So I think will be, in all different aspects, will be a very positive improvement.
Do you think that will give you even more ability to be even more aligned with kind of industry standard or, feeding schedules, or just, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, it certainly does. I think we've been doing some progress over there. Definitely, again, it's important to mention none of that would be possible without partnership, right? Large stakeholders are being helping, but we're definitely thinking about strategic plans or protocols where we're going to be able to have trainings through it. And so that's definitely big for the companies. I mean, the business out there, they want to be involved with university, and it's a win-win basically. So definitely, I think.
Yeah, and I think that kind of work speaks to the land grant mission, right? Like working in tandem with industry to solve really challenging problems.
Absolutely.
I think it sounds like a really exciting project, and one that it sounds like we're open for a partnership on that as well.
Absolutely.
So if folks are interested, just let us know. We'll get you more information.
Please.
Yeah, let us know. Yeah, if you want to be part of that, it'd be great. Okay.
So
question from you.
I have a question for Sara. I think one of the cool things you mentioned, almost, I'm going to try to not be as precise, but over 1,400 animals that you collect. It has generated publications and
Yes.
other things. And have the ability to test our own research facility. You mentioned the 55 visits. That's a really cool publication that came out from in-house. How do you feel as a researcher to have the ability to do this type of research in, some people call in your shop, right? Like how cool is that for you?
Yeah, it's really amazing, right? So it's a huge opportunity to actually have this level of precision management, precision measurement type facility, right? And actually be able to do this research at scale. So that's something that I would say, prior to coming here and all the other research that I've done, I would feel good if I had like 6 animals in experiment, right? And I'm measuring 6 animals methane. This is great. And we can get that information in an afternoon here, right? So it's really helpful, and it can help accelerate just our learning in this space, which again, because of the pressure and the questions that are coming on to the livestock industry and to the cattle industry specifically, we need to go faster and we need to learn faster. And so this is a huge ability or opportunity for us to actually do that quickly. And that's back to that feeding center, right? So like so much of the ability of us to influence methane emissions, it has to do with the animal's diet, right? Absolutely. So how we formulate rations or how we look at different ingredients and being able to feed those things precisely and get very precise answers is really paramount to everything in the enteric methane space, because basically we feed the bugs and then the bugs do their thing, right? So we had to make sure that what we're delivering to the rumen every day is consistent and what we expect we're actually delivering to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask a follow-up question, but then it just kind of fluttered out. So I'll see if it comes back. So Leo, what's next for the Climate Smart Research Facility?
Yeah, so we excited. Dr. Place has done great work in writing grants with the team and whatnot and getting funds. And we, as of right now, I think if you look in the agenda, we're going to be busy for the next, 24 months-ish?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're locked in.
So we are locked in.
Great.
We're definitely going to be busy over there. That's why also that batch station comes along very handy. We're looking forward to it. And there's a lot to go through. We're going to host a lot of cattle and definitely assess a lot of greenhouse gas emissions as well as feed conversion at that barn.
That's awesome. That's what it's for. So that's perfect.
Thank you.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about in the facility that you're like, oh man, this is a cool thing, or something you would want to make sure that our listeners know about it?
Yeah. So, I think just reemphasizing what's cool about it is that it is more reflective of an actual commercial pen condition. I think that's the part that's really important.
Industry applicable.
Yeah. So much of, and even what I just had mentioned of measuring like 6 animals at once, oftentimes we're putting animals in like a room or in some sort of other situation where they're not moving that much. And so it's not really reflective of real world conditions. And so that is what's really cool about this technology is we can look at things that are actually more reflective of reality and make sure that we're assessing performance at the same time. So it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions, right? It's about that whole bigger picture.
Yep. I think if you think about animal welfare and the way the animals are being, we allow them to be cattle, right? And at the same time, we're able to collect quality data. So I think that's what definitely makes it unique.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you all for being on the podcast today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We always appreciate that. We'd also like to invite you to join the conversation online if you want to. We're on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or would like to give us feedback, we're always open to that. You can email us at agnext.colostate.edu. And thanks again for tuning in to the AgNext Podcast. We're always excited to tell you about what's next from AgNext.